Hello everybody, my name is Triple X, and today I'm going to be answering a question I've had personally. What if Australia was fully green? Now, you might be wondering, what do I mean? Well, I mean specifically, like the image will just pop on screen now. I mean, if Australia looked like this when it was colonized, allowing there to be more green land for people to settle in. The reason why Australia doesn't is due to its due to the outback, causing it to be in an uninhabitable desert, which covers almost most of the entirety of the continent, which makes it impossible for any settlements to be built out there, besides the few smaller ones which rely heavily on transport from cities. Now, this would mean that most of the population would not be centralized to a singular area, specifically places like Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, and other countries along the coast. This would also allow to have a population similar to that of the US, due to the fact Australia is roughly around the same size as the US. Now, this also in turn makes Now, this actually is. Sorry, I'll talk about what I was going to talk about later. But specifically, this has repercussions on the two world wars, specifically World War One, due to the fact of Gallipoli. Now, you may be wondering, how does succeeding at Gallipoli change the entirety of World War One? Well, you see, Gallipoli would have dealt a massive blow to the Ottoman Empire, which then would have allowed for supplies to get into Russia, which could have led to no Russian Revolution, or most likely would have allowed for high enough morale to postpone it until after World War II. Plus, this would allow the Allies to get a good foot in a good secure into Turkish and Greek territory, which could allow them to start fighting better into the Balkans, to make Austria-Hungary start fighting on a three-front war, which would then cause it to fall, and most likely force Germany to fully surrender much faster. Now, this would have been a lot better for every single side, and would have cemented Australia as more powerful than it is currently deemed as, due to the fact that it had a successful campaign instead of the failure of Gallipoli. Now, this also does, in fact, change many other aspects of it, possibly even stopping something like the Soviet Union from occurring. This would also cement Australia as more of a superpower in the East. A Western superpower in the East would then allow for most of the conflicts that emerge today to stop appearing as much. Now, how does Australia, looking like this, change how the rest of the world would have reacted to a brand new country appearing like this? Well, you see, personally, I believe that the rest of the world would probably not have cared as much, due to the fact that England was the only one that cared about Australia due to the failings of America. See, Spanish cared more about their American and South American colonies, and they hadn't had any serious revolutions which stopped them from being able to send convicts to somewhere else. Until Australia became more cemented, this is when other countries would start caring a lot more, but it'd probably be too late, as England would have established a lot of dominance, which would have allowed for them to easily take the entirety of Australia. Now, it's possible that Australia would have become the crown jewel of the British Empire instead of India, because India was more likely to revolt than Australia, which, since it's now more heavily based and made by England, it is much more loyal than what India was historically, which now allows it to become much more valuable, also due to the fact that it has a large enough population to sustain most of the empire. Now, how would Australia, being completely green, affect the Aboriginal peoples who settled there hundreds of years before England had got there to have adapted, as well as the rest of the fauna? I personally believe that the Aboriginals would have stayed the same way, as the culture would have stayed very similar, as they believed that the land was shared and not fully theirs. Next, I would say that the animals, including most reptiles, most reptiles and insects would actually not exist, as the climate does not perfectly suit them, as well as koalas might actually eat something besides eucalyptus, which would probably be a lot less flammable, due to the fact that it does not require a dry climate to appear. It doesn't require dry leaves to also spread, allowing them to either be more smart or eat something other than one type of eucalyptus, which slowly kills your brain. How do I think that Australia being green would affect the rest of the world? Well, personally, I believe that during World War II or World War One, Australia becoming a world superpower would most likely happen, and due to the fact it would obviously upset China as the only dominant superpower in the Pacific region, causing a massive rivalry between the two. Australia will also possibly become either much more mining-based due to the fact it has a high population, or much more industrial and processing-based. This would get rid of its reliance on other countries to produce the machinery that it uses to create things, and make it more independent, which would be great for its economy. It would also probably contain the Pacific Islands and possibly some of Indonesia. Also, if World War II did happen, Japan would fall much quicker due to the fact that Australia, being the only real dominant ally force in the area, would be able to attack it much easier due to the fact it's powerful, and the fact that the US didn't have to come in at the last second, essentially, and start taking credit for everything. That was a bit of a joke there. But actually, on the topic of the US, I personally believe they would not be as dominant as a superpower, because it would not have needed to drop bombs on Japan, and the rest of the world would have been a lot easier due to the fact that we would have had around a US-sized power during the war, which would have allowed it to become much less reliant on the fact that the US brought in lots of supplies from an unattacked country. And yeah, I personally would say that the US would not be an immediate superpower, but it would still eventually become a superpower just due to its sheer size and economic power, but it would end up becoming a lot more like China's superpower system. Anyway, that is my video. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. I know it's short, but this is my first long-form video that I've put this much time and effort into. So yeah, if you've managed to finish all the way, please leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, I might make some more videos like this in the future, probably with a bit better stuff. Thanks. Bye.